Okay, we're going to learn a Sicha, talk with Rebbe, bringing from Shabbos Nachamu. Hope everyone had an easy fast. Shabbos Nachamu, Tafshin Memtes 1989. It's, I think, the same Kvias as this year, which was a Wednesday night, Thursday, Tisha B'Av. And let's bring up the text. Okay, Sicha Shabbos Parshas Nachamu. Sicha Shabbos Parshas Va'eschanan, Shabbos Nachamu, Yiraf Nachamov, like this year. So Friday's the 10th, and Shabbos is the 11th of Menachemov, Be'ezus Hashem, in the year Tafshin Memtes 1989. So the Rebbe says as follows: Shabbos Nachamu, Hi Shabbos Harishona Seven D'Nechemta. The Shabbos Nachamu is the first of the 7 Shabbosim of Nechama, of consolation, of the Haftaros from Yeshaya Navi all the way through till Rosh Hashanah. Shemaftirim b'nechamis Yeshayahu. That we read the Haftaros of the Nechama, of the consolation of Yeshaya Navi for the Churban. Mi'acher, he says, because Tisha B'Av ad Rosh Hashanah, from after Tisha B'Av to Rosh Hashanah is when we have Haishan, which is starting from after Shabbos after Tisha B'Av till Rosh Hashanah. We have the 7 Shabbosim of Nechama from Yeshayahu after the Churban. We start with the first Shabbos, which is Nachmu which is this Shabbos. Nachmu Beis Pam and Necham Bekaflaim. Hashem gives us a double consolation, not just Nachmu, but Nachmu 2 times. So the Rebbe says we have to understand. Seemingly the idea has to be surely that as the weeks go on, Hashem is adding to the Nechama, because each week is building on the previous week. That's how Nechama works. The idea of Nechama, of consolation, works that you build it stronger and stronger to elevate the person out of their situation to a level of Nechama, feeling the feeling of consolation. And therefore we find that the beginning, and this is based on the Avaduram, that the beginning is the Nechama, which is via the prophets, right? Yeshaya is told by Hashem, Nachmu Amwi, you go and console my people. God tells the prophets, you go on my behalf, you're Navi, but still you go and give Nechama, give consolation to my people. But then, as the Abu Dharam says, that what do the Jewish people say when they hear that the Nevi'im, the prophets, are those who give the Nechama? So Tzion says, which is referring to the Jewish people, Azavani Hashem, God has abandoned me. Why is he sending consolation? Via the Nevi'im. We want to hear from God himself. The Jewish people are not satisfied. They don't feel pious. They don't feel that so far the Nechama is satisfying because it's coming from the prophets. And the Jewish people and the prophets come back and give that message over to Hashem. That what do they say? The Jewish people are not satisfied. They don't feel that the Nechama coming from the prophets is satisfying. It's good enough. Ani soyara loy nechuma. That there is it's this raging, a boat on raging waters that can't find consolation. The Jewish people are not finding Nechama from the prophets alone. It's not enough. Then we have the next week that says, God tells the Jewish people, I am the one who's giving consolation, not the prophets. And not one time Anochi, 2 times Anochi. This is brought down from the Torah, I think. Who brings down Abu Dharam, I think it says this Seder. So he says, the Rebbe quotes it many times. So the Rebbe says like this, 11, Abu Dharam. We say that Parshas Va'aftar is B'Shem Medrash. So Vapiza Tzarch Love, and so that's the case we have to understand. So why is it that we start with Yeshayahu that says Nachmu 2 times consolation to my people, if it's building up, so the first week should be Nachmu, and the second week should be Nachmu. Means even the way we're starting, although the Jewish people are not satisfied with it, and they want that should be that God himself is the one who consoles and not via the prophets. But even via the prophets, it starts with a double Nechama, Kaflayim. It should have built up, starting with one and then two. The Rebbe says more than this. The Purunusa, since we're coming from the 3 weeks of Pranius, of bad things that befell the Jewish people from the 17th of Tammuz till the 9th of Av, which are the 3 weeks of that we remember the capture of Yerushalayim, the fall of Jerusalem, and the destruction of the temple. How could you expect, and especially Yud Aleph Av, you're sitting on the floor Tisha B'Av, which is on the 9th, which is the Thursday, and comes Yud Aleph Av, the Rebbe is talking Yud Aleph Av, like this year, and all of a sudden we talk Nachmu 2 times. How could you take people through such through an extreme experience? The spectrum from all the way down on the floor to double Nachmu from Hashem after the destruction. And on Friday, we're still sitting in the burning base on Mikdash in Tirach HaTzais. V'yuvim behegdim, the Rebbe says, well, understand, the Kesher, V'sharchis, the Parshas HaShavua, Shegam ba Matzinu Shemaschil Miyad B'inin Achi Naila, Digmas HaSchol B'Nachmu B'Kaflaim. To understand this, let's first analyze the Haftarah, which is always the Haftarah of Shabbos Nachamu, is always on Va'eschanan. Now we find this idea similar in the Parsha itself, where there's something that starts with like a double Nechama. And when we understand, hey Aaron, I hope you had a good fast. And once we understand the way it is in this week's Parsha, first you have to know what the Rebbe is talking about. We can understand how to apply it also to the Haftarah. How does the Haftarah go straight away from Churban to Nachamu 2 times consolation? Because as if the idea is as if there's like no shame. I mean, you just destroyed the Jerusalem. The people went to exile. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And all of a sudden, Nachamu. I mean, it's a little heavy. The Alpha Pisha Haftarah the Shivah D'Nechemta Eina Me'ena Parshas Doime B'Doime. Although usually the rule is that the Haftarah has to be as close as possible to the message of the Parsha. But that's only so if the Haftarah and the Parsha are only connected by that idea itself. For instance, if you have Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, or Shabbos Erev Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos Chanukah, so if there's another event, then you'll find more the Haftarah with the event, whether it's Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh, etc., or the 4 weeks around Purim, than the Parsha itself, because then we don't look so much towards the Parsha. These are Haftarah connected to the times. So actually, the Rambam writes that officially Parshas Va'eschanan, Eikev, Re'eh, etc., have other haftorahs which are connected to the parsha. The Jewish people took upon themselves to do a different haftorah, which is the haftorah of Nechama, of Shivah D'Nechemta from Yeshayahu. So it has to do with this destruction. It doesn't have really to do with the parsha. So the Rebbe says, even though these 7 weeks don't have really to do to the parsha so much daima like a regular haftorah. Lefi Hazman, it goes based on the time of the 7 weeks after the Churban. Lefi Hama'ura, based on the situation of the destruction. Nevertheless, what happens in the time is also connected to the parsha. The Rebbe always looked to find in the parsha not just that we're going through this week, but you could also find the connection, what happens in the parsha, with everything that's happening in the time. And therefore, if this is the time of Nechama, after the destructions, we're going to find that also in the parsha. I mean, specifically, Va'eschanan is the parsha that we read on Tisha B'Av itself. Shabbos Nachamu, we aschal al tkufa de Shivah D'Nechemta. Again, the Shabbos Nachamu is the beginning when we start with the consolation, the 7 weeks of Nechama, from Nachamu from Va'eschanan until Nitzavim Vayelech. V'noisev ala haschala harigam roish shekaleles kol hemshech hazman v'avoided the Shivah D'Nechemta. The Rebbe always talks when you have the beginning. We don't call Rosh Chodesh Hascholas HaChodesh. We don't call Rosh Hashanah Hascholas Hashanah, which in Hebrew would mean English would mean the beginning of the month or the beginning of the year. We call it Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, because in the head has all the energy of the body. So too, the beginning of something, the Rebbe says it's Rosh, it's the head of the 7 in Nachmusa means it has within it all the power of Nechama, not just the first week. So Shvehem Nasis HaNechama in Shabbos Nachamu has within it all the energy of the Nechama that spreads out over 7 weeks. Alini Nachurban with regard to the destruction, Va'golis the Gimel Shavuos that we remembered in the 3 weeks. Plaza to Pernusa. Ve'inim B'zad, ideas like this. Okay, so we have one question. The question basically is to understand why is there a double Nachmu, and what is it? What's the connection? And we'll understand it through the parsha. And why does it have to be double? Why is it not one? Nechama one time, not double. Okay. Ideas like this. But basically, we're trying to understand what is this idea of Nechama? What is the consolation that comes so soon after Tisha B'Av so powerfully? Ideas like this. In Sbar Lil, we explain the Plaza to Pernusa, the 3 weeks that we remember the unfortunate events. Heim Gam Keneged Gimel Moichin, they correspond to the 3 levels of intellect: Chachma, Bina, Das, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. The Shivah D'Nechemta and the 7 weeks of Nechama are Keneged Gimel Zayin Midas, the 7 attributes of Chesed, Gvur, Tferes, Netzach, Hoidi, Soid, Malchus. So there's the 7 emotions and the 3 intellectual spheros, or the person koicha, strengths within the person. What's the fundamental difference between a person's emotional health and strengths and one's intellectual, mental strengths? Shemoichin heim hahelim shemoichin heim elim la'atzmai midas heim gilui. Because the moichin is usually hidden, helem, it's to yourself, meaning to say, the intellect is not about so much the expression of intellect, it's what you understand. And midos is basically how you act based on your feelings with others. Lazulais. In general, the ability to be disconnected is in intellect, and a person is an intellectual. And you see a situation from an intellectual perspective, it's disconnected from possibly from what's going on. You just see it from a visual, so to say. But when something's emotional, it means you're involved, and it's connected either to the thing or person that's in question. L'chaim b'gimel hashavua is the first 3 weeks. Shekeneged gimel merchen, that's with regard to the intellect. Hatoiv hu behelim. So like intellect is hidden. It's not expressive necessarily, it's expressive within yourself, but not with someone with outside. So the good that's there is concealed. The Rebbe says with regard to the subject at hand, which is the destruction of the temple. So the mind sees it for the situation, the raw situation. Although it knows intellectually that there's good here, but it's seeing it for what it is, which is the destruction. As the Alter Rebbe writes in his 5th section, or the 4th section, the letters, for instance, a great king, an awesome king, that has a son that becomes soiled, and the king himself goes and cleans and washes his soiled child, his only child, from great love. So because it's great love, the child is dirty, soiled. So the child needs to be cleansed. But the king loves the child. He doesn't let anyone else wash him. He himself washes him. This is an example to the destruction. The Jewish people soiled themselves spiritually. So God's not going to let anyone else discipline the Jewish people. God himself does. But we don't see that. That's concealed. What we see is the uncomfortable experience of the cleansing. This cleansing also could be like a child. Father sometimes has to physically discipline his child. When it comes to the 7 weeks of Nechama, that's an emotional connection. Then we see it the way it is, the way it really is, that this comes from good. And we're able to get consolation from the toiv, the good of the experience. Toiv hanir vanigla, a revealed and an obvious good. Until the Rebbe says that the cleansing itself doesn't lead to good, we see the cleansing itself as good. When we moving, the Rebbe says, if this is understood, Shabbos Nachamu has Shivah D'Nechemta. When it comes to Shabbos Nachamu, the beginning of the weeks of consolation, with Geshes Hamshacha Me'ahelim Demoichin Ala G-dliness, because it's the first week, so it's the week of transition. We're going from a situation of our intellectual visual of the situation, and what we see is the bad, the discipline, and we understand this has to be disciplined. Someone has to clean the soiled son. Might as well be Hashem, right? What did David say? David had a choice. He chose God to punish. So intellectually you see it, but now the week of Shabbos Nachamu, in the fourth week, the first of the 7 weeks, is the transition from intellect to feelings, to emotions. And then that's how it continues throughout the 7 weeks. That we're transitioning from the negative of the 3 weeks to the 7 weeks of Nechama, each one in its own emotion of Chesed, Gvur, Tferes, in a way that's revealed kindness. And this is how we can understand this connection to V'eschanan. V'eschanan b'Gematria, the word Eschanan is a number value of Taf Kuf Tes Vav, 515. So the Taf, of course, is V'eschanan is a Taf, and Nun and Nun is another 50. 50 is 100. And then you put together the remaining letters of Ches Al Vav is 14, right? 8 and 6 is 14, and the Aleph is 15. So 515 is the number value of the word V'eschanan. What does this mean? Shetaf Kuf Remez Al Hamidos, that the 515 correspond to the emotions. Ikar Amidos, Hey Amidos, Kfi Shekol Echad, Kulula Mieser, Ve'eser Mieser. That you have the 500 because there's 5 essential midos, meaning Yisod and Malchus is already connection. So we're talking about Chesed, Gvur, Tferes, Netzach, Hod. So the 5 essential midos of emotion, feeling. Yisod is taking that feeling and connecting, and Malchus is the receiving, so from communicating. So the 5 midos of different various emotions is times 10 is 100, is 500. So what's the 50? V'tes Vav is the first 2 letters of God's name, Yudke. Remes Al Moichin, which is the intellect, because the Yudke is the first 2 letters of God's name, which is A, Yud and Hey represent Chachma and Bina. And also they're the first 2 letters which are the names of God that are hidden. So why do we put it's 500 and then comes to 15? The idea is to show that the primary mission over here is to bring down the revelation of the good within the emotions themselves. The question is we're learning an idea that's deep. It has to be broken down a bit more in detail of really why is intellect the cold. It means the intellect is the cold. I think what he means to say, and I'm going on a limb here because it's not 100% so clear. Why are the 3 weeks Chacham Bin and Das, which usually we say the contrary, that a person could understand the good but can't feel it. And here we're saying that from the 3 weeks it's the negative, the first 3 weeks, and the 7 weeks is the feeling of good. And we transition from the intellect to the emotion in Shabbos Nachamu, and to start to feel the good. I think what it means to say is not that in the first 3 weeks we only we see as bad. Is because it's not emotional. It's not a contradiction to just see it and see the negative as a negative, because it's intellectual. Intellectuals just could analyze things, but emotionally, it's at the end of the day, it's how you feel. And if you're feeling bad, so then it's bad. So it has a bad effect on you. So therefore, you can't have that disconnected intellectual perspective of it. And therefore, if it has to be revealed, it has to be revealed of as it really is good. Intellectual could be disconnected. So therefore, it's not a contradiction for you to understand something that's bad. But to feel bad, that's already another level. And therefore, we have to feel the way it really is, which is good. I think that's what he means to say, that Rebbe means to say. So the Rebbe says, and what is the next week? The next week that we start reading in Shabbos in the Mincha is Parshas Eikev. Tevis v'hoya yeshnam dal da'isis shem havaya. The word v'hoya also has the three letters of God's name, Hey, Vav, Yud, and which are the three main letters, because there's two Heys, but it's one, it's Hey twice. That says V'hoya, first comes Vav Hey, and then the Hey Yud, so the second letters come first. We know also Vav Hey represents Midas and Malchus. And that, so therefore, again, we bring the midas to show that the primary is how's the person feeling about it. Comes before the first two letters of the intellect. The idea is that you should emotionally feel the nechama. And we don't feel emotionally the nechama in the first 3 weeks. It means we can know it, but because it's not emotional, we look at what we see. What does this mean in our service of God? Birur, Hamidis Tafka. We know that our job now is, that's why Avram and basically his descendants were given the land of the 7 nations, not 10, even though Avram was promised 10, because we don't have the ability yet to transform our intellect. All we have is the ability to transform our midos. So therefore, that nowadays primary our avodah is l'shanis hamidos, to work on our midos Tafka, on our attributes, our feelings. It's not only in the times of the temple, but specifically in the times of the exile, and especially we were holding now at the end of the Galus. When we're holding the heel, when we get to the level of the heel, which is like Eikev of Mashiach, the end of the Galus, getting into the beginning, the footsteps of Mashiach, then Tishma, and then we start to really understand, feel the emotional connection, the positive. It comes into this man. Eikev the Mashiach, at the time of the footsteps of the heels of Mashiach. And also the time of the last minutes of Golus is the darkest part of Golus. We're not able to intellectually connect. Go open up a book on the Holocaust on October 7th. And try to understand it intellectually. How can you understand it intellectually? We don't have the ability to. It's too dark for us to understand. The Rebbe says, we can't have an avoid of moichin, of understanding, of intellect. Kedeboy properly. This is how we feel. And it's Shazau Indian the Vahaya Eikev Tishmon that it has to get to the heel. The heel is the lowest part of the body. So too, V'eschanan, that's the 500 before the 15. The 15 represents Yudke, which is Chachma Bina, the intellect. And Tavkuf represent the 5 essential Midas times 10 times 10. B'gemati V'eschanan. She'ikra avoidehu bevavke, l'fnei Yudke. Today the main thing is the second 2 letters of God's name. And eventually we should come to transform the mind. Again, that's why when Mashiach comes, we're going to get the last 3 of the 10 nations. Even though in the name of Hashem the order is first Yudke Vavke, so first Chachma Bina, then the 6 Midas, and then Malchus. But in how the avodah from the person, that's from above down. But from the person, right now our job is to master the land of 7, which is the land of the emotions. As far as Agilid Yudke, Kvishahu Sham Shem Ifnei Atzma. L'mayla meha Yudke the Shem Avayish is Gal B'Shlemus Laslavim. So now it is first we start with the avoda of the emotions, then we go back to revealing the Yudke. But that's the way Yudke is also a name on its own. Only eventually is there going to be a single revelation of all 4 letters. The Rebbe says the point is like this. There's a Gemara, which we're going to learn next week, that is that when it talks about Vayhi and Vahaya. So it says about Vahaya that Vahaya is positive. Ein Vahaya Lashon Simcha. Vayhi v'mei Achashverosh, the Gemara says that Vayhi v'mei is always negative. Vahaya is positive. Lashon Simcha. Given Sha'avoida the Vavkei Shvachas Yamim, V'hoye Eikev Tishmon, Shagam B'choshech HaGolos, the Eikev is Mashiach, She'eni Mer Agil Yudke, V'komakim Tishmon, that even in the level that we're going to be holding, the time of the end of the day, the darkness, the last days of Golos, and we're going to have the Vavke, we're going to be solid emotionally, even though we're not intellectually there. So basically, what the Rebbe is saying is an amazing thing, that's a level of Mesiras Nefesh, really. Why? Because you're ready to emotionally connect to God, even though you don't understand it. You're emotionally there, you're not intellectually there. Usually we say the vice versa. A person is intellectually there, but not emotionally there. The Rebbe says that's in the Seder, that's in the order of Yud Kei Vav Kei. But comes the Eikev Tishma in the days before Mashiach, our job is to focus on the Vav Kei. Be emotionally there, love God. You have questions, right? Any hostage that was there in Gaza 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if they were able to connect, it was emotional. Even though I'm sure they had questions. My wife told me last night after the fast, I meet Friday morning, that there was a group of hostages that fasted on Tisha B'Av. They weren't necessarily Mesortit people that were usually Torah observing people. Maybe the years before they didn't keep Tisha B'Av possibly, but they said let's keep Tisha B'Av all together. Maybe in the merit of keeping Tisha B'Av we'll be saved. And the person who told the story was saved. I'm not sure about all of them, but the point is even though that's a person could say, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Intellectually, you could argue about that, but emotionally, they felt that's what they wanted to do. So it says, and the Rebbe says, when a person is not intellectually there, but is able to emotionally be connected notwithstanding, that creates a tremendous joy above. Yismach Hashem b'maisav, God takes joy in His creation. And that gives us joy. Of Yismach Yisrael ba'osav, the Jewish people take joy in their Creator. And that's the Simcha spirals out of control until it brings the Simcha, we get out of the intellectual funk and we get emotionally excited of Simcha, of joy. We're able to turn that the 3 weeks themselves should be transformed to good days, the days of holidays. That's how. And the Rebbe asked this questions many times. How do you go from Tisha B'Av to Tu B'Av? There's not even the cycle of 7 days. Is because when you realize the non-understanding of everything, you're connected emotionally to God. Even if you have intellectual questions, you're able to springboard from Tisha B'Av to Chamishas B'Av, the happiest day of the year, the 15th of Av. There weren't holidays in the calendar of the Jewish people, Chamishas B'Av, like the 15th of Av. The Rebbe adds, Shabbos Nachamu. It's not just the connection in the first word that we see that Nachamu, this idea of consolation, because we go right away from intellectual to emotional. We see that by the 515 tefillos the Moshe daven, and we push the 500, which is the 5 times the 100 times 5 of the midos, of the essential midos, and then we go to Yud Kei, the 15th, which is Hashem's name. But it's also connected to the whole message of the parsha. Bagdama, the Rebbe says, Parshas Va'eschanan hi parsha klali sheba mishtakefes haTorah kula. There's a certain general vision from the word mishtakefes is usually mishtakefes also could be used like a view, a high altitude view, a lookout. So give us a general positive lookout of the whole Torah. Parshas Va'eschanan mesupar barucha v'pratis ha'edus matan Torah. Parshas Va'eschanan is the second time when we repeat the 10 Commandments, the giving of the Torah. It's not just that we have the 10 Commandments. Moshe talks about it. The day you stood before God on Mount Horeb, which is referring to Matan Torah. It talks about everything leading up to that day. A person may ask in the early days, from when man was created, has there ever been such a great event? And then we have the details of the 10 Commandments. Of course, the whole Torah is included within the 10 Commandments. And then starting with Shishi, the Shema Yisrael, the most essential prayer of the Jewish people, Kabbalah Mach Shemaim, accepting the yoke of heaven. Koil Gamat Sivu V'Haftas Hashem Lekecha, and the Shema Yisrael leads to loving God. Sharish L'Chol Mitzvah Saseh, which is the foundation of all the 248 positive commandments. Shekol Gam Mitzvah Saseh, the years Hashem includes in it the fear of God. Shisharish L'Chol Shasal Mitzvah Saseh, and when you have the positive commandment, the fearing God, you also, with that comes the 365 prohibitions that are based on Yira. And it permeates a person through both sides of the heart, both Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. The Rebbe doesn't even want to call him bad, but even the advisor from the left side, even from your Yetzer Lo Tov, you love Hashem with all your heart, your entire soul, your entire being of the person, shaladam. Even with all your money, like Rashi says. That means not just yourself, but the love of God permeates your properties, the things that belong to you. Until the abyss under your feet. That's talking about the money of the person. Not just with your money, but in your place of influence, that you write it on your doorsteps and on your gates. That why is it on the gate, by the door and by the gate, to give influence outside your house and your gate of your space. And from there goes to the gates of the countries and the cities. The whole world should be permeated with the message of Shema Yisrael. And then we finish off the parsha Yom La'asoisa. The Kaya Klos Ma'aseinu V'Avedisenu Meshach Shis Alfei Shin D'Haviyom. That Hayoim La'asoisa means that this world, before Mashiach comes, the 6,000 years is Hayoim La'asoisa, and today we have to do. And after the 6,000 years, we come to the world of reward, which is the 7,000 years. Rashi himself says, today you do it, and tomorrow with Nolam Haba, that's when the world of reward is, the proper reward. The Rebbe always says that the reward that we have today of V'chukaisai Telechu, a person should walk in God's ways, and you'll get the gifts, you'll get in Mater, you get Geshem V'itam, you're going to get the rain at the right time. That's like an expense account. Person gets a job, you have to pay, but you can't tell them, go out there and pay for the hotels and the foods and I'll pay you back. You give them a company credit card. So the Rebbe says that's the schar we get today. But the real schar, the real reward for our avodah is going to come when Mashiach comes. So what do we see? That this parsha includes the avodah of the Jewish people of all the times. The Rebbe says that though it's talking about all the times, but the emphasis is on the end of days, the last days before Mashiach comes, which, like we finish off, Hayom L'Saisam. What does it mean, Hayom L'Saisam? When do you have to warn or kind of focus on today? When you're getting closer to tomorrow. When today is the beginning of the day is one thing, but when today is the last seconds of today, that has to be the emphasis of Hayom L'Saisam. Shemimen Nechrasim, take of me out, because after today you go immediately into tomorrow, which is the times of Mashiach. Just like with the end of the day, when as soon as you cross over from the day to the next day, you go into the day to the next day. So too, when we finish the today of this life of the 6,000 years, we go straight into the world of the time of Mashiach. So God has to say, don't slack off in the last seconds. Hayom L'Saisam, now you can still accomplish things. So the Rebbe is saying that the message of the parsha, as much as it's talking about all times, is to give courage and support for the last seconds. Shemaschil likrit mincha, and as we go into the next parsha, which is Eikev, ki noisev al pir shvay Eikev tishmon kai al achris hayamim. The Soif HaGolus Eikev Mashiach, although it's talking about the footsteps of Mashiach, like we said before, Eikev means Eikev Mashiach, the steps coming into Mashiach. Yeshno Gam Apir Shekoy Al Achris Hayamim, the Yemaisa Mashiach. It's not just the end of Golus, but it's also talking about the days of Mashiach itself. Kipir Shemedish Amar Lema Kadosh Baruch Hu, Schari Be'Eikev Ani Noisim Lechem. The schar I'm going to give an Eikev. Like it says, V'hoya Eikev Tishmon Shekoy Al Schar Shlach Ravoida. That's talking about the reward that's going to happen all the way at the end. When the beginning of the days of Mashiach, the Machar, the Kabbos Charim, that's the tomorrow of time. Shepirish Zeh Masim Gam Ima Pashat HaKosiv Shebeglal Eikev Shetishmon Es HaMishpatim Me'ele Yikabos Char. Because Eikev is saying a statement. Because you listen, Eikev is also not just the heel, but because you listen to me, therefore now you're going to get the reward. When are we talking about that? That's already talking about the days of Mashiach, not the end days of the Golus. God's going to keep the covenant, and the covenant is there's reward for the efforts. The idea is that it's not going to be any delay. We're going to go straight from the end of the days of Golus straight into the days of Mashiach. And this is the old idea of the Shabbos Nachamu. We start the 7 weeks of Nechama. What's the meaning of Nechama? We're finished with Golus, die Golus. Nechama means we're being transformed to a place of Nechama, of consolation, means of positivity. Including all the times and all the efforts that we did throughout the ages. We finished the time of today to do. God's going to have no delay. It's not going to be a post-dated check at the end of the month. As soon as we leave, immediately we get paid the schar, the reward of the days of Mashiach. Tomorrow happens right away. That year, the Rebbe, of course, possibly it's not the same Rambam we're holding now, but the Rambam over there, and that time, 1989, the Rebbe says, it's Hilchos Keilim Vaschos Hilchos Mikvaos. They were going over from the laws of vessels, which deal with the laws of Tum and Tara, what's considered a vessel, and then the laws of purity, and then also the laws of the mikvahs, of the waters, the purifying waters. What's a mikvah? What's a kosher mikvah? It's different levels of a mikvah, right? The Rambam writes that most of the laws are to fix our mindset, the sakinas adayas. That the whole idea of the mitzvahs is in these days, meaning the days of the 6,000 years, is the sakinas adayas, is to change our mindset. To take us into the days of the future, the days of Mashiach. What is Keilim? The Rebbe says Keilim vessels. Keilim represents a vessel, is a receptacle to receive, and that's what we're dealing with. Oiris B'Keilim, lights and vessels of the time of the 6,000 years of Hayom Lasosa. Today we have to do. What does it mean? Our job in this world of the 6,000 years, whether it is in the times of the temple, and specifically in the times of diaspora, when we're spread around in the world. Why we spread around in the world? To make the world a keli, to make the different places of the world a vessel for godliness. B'dugma hakeli, just like a vessel, shibata l'gamri l'adav shebetoichei. The halacha is that a vessel is a total receptacle of what's inside, and it applies even to the laws of Shabbos. About if you're holding something that you can carry, how does it affect with the thing that you're carrying it with, the keli, the vessel? Because the vessel has no mitzias of itself. The whole point of the vessel is to contain an energy or an object that's for whatever it is. In this case, positively godliness. The idea is that when we have any opportunity you have to turn a vessel into godliness, it's not the transformation of the vessel. It's that you're giving an opportunity for the vessel to contain godliness. Oh, I have something here. I can make it into a moment. Here's a place where I could reveal godliness. In this vessel, I could reveal godliness. In this vessel, I could reveal godliness. And the whole point is to show you think this is something. This is just a vessel to contain godliness. Just like a vessel has no metzias for itself, so too the point is to show that everything in the world is just an opportunity. Oh, in this thing, in this experience, in this moment, in this actual thing, the tefillin, it's holy. The candles for Shabbos candles. And the kol metzias here, amitas imtzo. The whole point is the real truth, which is godliness. Because anything that exists, whether it's in heaven and earth, and anything in between, only comes from God Himself. It's quoting the Rambam. As the Rambam writes in the beginning of his publication of the Yad HaChazaka. Hilchos Keilim, Shiva mini Keilim hayu shemekabel tum min haTorah. Poilim matzav shel tahara toirim l'truma. Even if the keli itself could become impure, you could turn it pure. I'm not sure exactly, remembering exactly the laws that he's referring to make it pure for the with regard to if it should be a vessel for holding truma. Okay, so that's the idea. Is basically of vessels is to show how everything is a vessel for godliness. Let's just finish until Vav. The Rebbe says a mikvaos. What's the idea of the laws of a mikvah? What's a mikvah? Which is the waters the person immerses themselves, he or she, for purification. How do you purify a vessel? A person's also a vessel for the nefesh alikis, for the God, for the soul, and the nefesh babas. So how do you purify your vessel? Is through immersing it in the waters of the mikvah. Kol atmeim bein adam bein kelim, whether a person or a vessel. In order for a person to get purity, it has to be waters that are mikvah, that are held in the earth. Okay, there's different definitions of what is a mikvah, mayim chayim, a spring, etc. It has to be water that's not taken from a vessel. It has to be waters that were contained in the water, in the ground. That the completion of the keli is when it goes into the mikveh. Why? That the idea is that if the whole purpose is of a keli to be a receptacle for godliness, the point that water you put in the mikveh to show, just like you immerse a keli in a mikveh becomes pure, the idea is to reach the level where the keli itself becomes so immersed in the knowledge of godliness. Like the Rambam writes, the koyal deas Hashem, to know God. That through every keli, it shouldn't just be a receptacle for godliness, but it should be a method of knowing godliness. Like it says in days of Mashiach, the world is going to be full with God's knowledge, like the sea, like the water covers the sea. Like it says in the Rambam, Hilchos Mashiach, as that Rambam finishes the Rambam, the Sefer Yad. The Rebbe says, meaning to say, not only do we get purified, the vessel becomes pure actually. But it could still, if you do something afterwards, it could come tummy again, impure again. The main idea is to reach a level that the vessel can never again become impure, which is like a avodah of a person. Sometimes we're good, we could really cleanse ourselves, but we could also become impure again afterwards. But when Mashiach comes, it's going to be a situation where there's not going to be a possibility that we should become impure again. It's going to eliminate the possibility of hepechatar, of the opposite of cleanliness, of purity. Because the whole world, there's going to be no place to get impure. The whole world is going to be purified like the sea, like the water covers the sea. That's going to come in the days of Mashiach. Okay, we're going to stop over here, but the underlying message over here that the Rebbe is giving us is the Nechama that we go. The idea is to the Nechama, the consolation that we could take, the transformation from our sometimes our dry intellectual situation to be emotionally connected. And that emotional connection, like the Rebbe says, causes such simcha to Hashem that notwithstanding of where we're holding intellectually, is that God Himself responds to such a simcha that brings us to a high place, and therefore starts the weeks of Nechama. The Rebbe still has some questions that we didn't answer, the double Nechama, etc. But that each one could learn on their own. Be'ez Hashem. Thank you for joining. I hope everyone had an easy fast. And the next class is what's Shabbos. Be'ez Hashem on the stories of the Baal Shem Tov and the laws of Sefer Torah and laws of Tefillah. Take care.